I'm Nick, and I am a collegiate video game coach.
Awesome, Nick. Well, thank you for being here. So, I'm assuming you're a gamer yourself.
Oh, absolutely. If I wasn't, it'd be a very interesting profession choice.
Why do you say that? Why, I'm sure it's the inside knowledge you have to know, but what do you mean by that?
Yes. So right now is a collegiate video game coach. There's a lot to it, and right now I'm at a very, very new program at
Okay.
a local satellite school over here. If you're familiar with IU, we are a
Hmm.
satellite school of them.
Okay.
And so we are brand new, just started up this year and really just building from that ground up. And what you really learn quick is you're teaching, or not even teaching, but coaching all of these different games. And you have to try to learn all these different games. Imagine being a sports coach, right?
Yeah.
Like you teach football, you're also in charge of basketball, and guess
Right.
what? You're also going to do soccer. And you got to balance all of them and learn all of them and master all of them. And it's a lot.
You know what? I definitely didn't make the connection that you're right. When you cross games, it's almost like crossing a different sport because it's completely different rules,
Yep.
completely different strategy. You know what? I never even thought about that. That's pretty brilliant.
Right. It's intense. And I think it's so new that not a lot of people give it credit for yet. There's a lot of people just see, hey, they're playing video games, right? How hard could that be? Well, let me tell you.
Well, yeah, I have some later questions around just perception and things like that. So, just for the audience as well, so we don't have to keep saying collegiate video game coach,
Right.
it is known as esports. So, I'm assuming that's what your school is calling it. That's what kind of
Yep.
what the branding and that's what the leagues are called. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So yeah, my title is technically an esports head coach. A
Okay.
lot of times too, you'll see schools label them as directors who are kind of in charge of the whole department itself, and then you'll even have multiple coaches if you're a really big program.
Okay. So you're not only in something fairly new for the market, you're also in a brand new program for this university or this college specifically. So everything is brand new.
Yes, new equipment, new
Ooh.
students. Like we have a team of about 90% freshmen. So we are building from the ground up as we speak.
Wow. Okay. Well, that poses its own challenges.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So for background, so you are a gamer. How long have you been playing video games?
Well, I like to say, I don't know if I have an exact day, but probably since I was about 3 years
Okay.
old. I
Okay.
actually remember I was screaming and crying about something, and my brother was playing Spyro. So just to shut
Yeah.
me up, my parents threw the controller in my hand and told him, "Hey, let your brother play." And from there, it kind of manifested in something I absolutely loved and obsessed over. And now that I can actually do it as a profession is really, really cool for me.
Yeah, I can only, yeah, I'm sure it's a dream come true. So Spyro was the kickoff game. Oh, that's pretty
Yes.
fascinating. That's a pretty great game, actually.
Yeah,
Um,
not very competitive, but
yeah, no doubt. No doubt. It's kind of like I don't know, like a new age, I would say Donkey Kong or even
yeah,
Ratchet and Clank, kind of similar to that.
for sure.
For any, well, some people may know Donkey Kong's got to resonate at least, but the Donkey Kong 64 like adventure style versus, just up the screen.
Right.
Um, so was that the moment the love started, or it took later to really, turn it into something that you love doing all the time?
It from as far as I've been told by my parents and siblings, that it blossomed from there. I'm
Okay.
somebody who was a complete nerd. I would definitely choose instead of doing extracurriculars, I wanted to play video games.
Okay.
And so I was definitely probably playing more than the average person, whether that's good or bad.
Same seas. Did you play other sports?
So I did get into trying to play other sports.
Okay.
So I played football in middle school for about 3 days. And and then I realized it wasn't that it was bad. I really wasn't. But I wanted to do something where I could choose how I spent my time. And
Hmm.
football was gonna be really demanding, while video games, I get to choose when to pick up that controller and put it down.
Interesting. Okay. So, and the reason I asked that is because obviously the team aspect of the things you're doing
Right.
now and understanding team dynamics. So you had an exposure of 3 days for that. Is
Right, right. A little interesting. But now I will say, kind of the spin off of that, I still loved sports growing up. I really
okay.
did. And that was probably video games and sports were my other passion, specifically professional sports.
Okay.
I grew up in a family where my dad was just all about Philadelphia sports, and
Okay.
I'm from Pennsylvania, so that's kind of what I was bred into and became a really big fan of them. And that's actually what I thought I wanted to do right out of high school. And so I ended up looking into becoming in that industry. I
Mhm.
went to Temple University, if you're familiar with it,
Yep.
and I actually got a major in sport and recreation management. And
Okay.
so my idea, I wanted to be a scout. I wanted to be a general manager, like a lot
Okay.
of big sports fans did. And so that was kind of my initial journey out of high school, and things kind of turned and twisted into other avenues.
Still okay. Well, yeah, that's really fascinating. Okay, so Eagles, Phillies, Flyer, you the whole gamut.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Lots of people like that. So, getting into the esports coaching, like, how did that come about? So you were going a totally different path. You wanted to be in general management or scouting or anything like
Right.
that, and then what was that pivot point?
Yeah. So interesting enough, and it's probably similar for a lot of people, is COVID happened.
Hmm.
And so at the time, I was actually interning for the Philadelphia Eagles, and I was going to be my third season returning for them. And they
Wow.
ended up, COVID hit, and they weren't able to keep anybody who was part time or interning. And
Okay.
so that left me kind of exploring what else am I, going to enjoy or able to do. And I had a very interesting background where I tried a couple different things, and I ended up kind of realizing I really love to educate people.
Okay.
And so I ended up kind of turning that into becoming a business teacher out here. And right now I live in Indiana, but a business teacher out here. And, if explored that in my first year, I was given that opportunity to actually be the esports coach for the high school team here. And so that was kind of my first little taste of what it was like to become an actual esports coach and what that whole industry looked like. And then I was able to kind of flip that into becoming now a college coach.
So I'm assuming, yeah, that's so interesting to me. So you saw, I guess, a job application or a job opportunity,
Mhm.
and you saw esports, and you're like, well, that's interesting. I know tons about video games. I like sports. I like educating. I like the business side of things. So that and you. So one of the things that one of the questions I put on here was, what do you, since this is so new, what do you put on your resume for this job?
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of like what you talked about earlier, where, you asked me what my experience was with sports, right? And so it's kind of the same idea. What would you want from somebody who's going to coach your traditional sport, right?
Sure.
So somebody who is capable of doing team building, capable of doing recruitment,
Mm,
capable of, managing a program, of coaching people, able to handle, young men and women to essentially lead them into not only a great program, but to develop them as individuals. And so I kind of combined my, sports background a little bit, having these experiences in the sports industry. And then I also took my education background, and I was really trying to push that. I'm coming in as somebody who's an educator, but also knows the entire sports realm and how to actually manage a successful team.
mm. What did that interview process look like for the high school and for the college?
High school was very hands off. They're like, hey, you want it?
Here you go.
Yeah, so they actually had a coach that literally dropped out. He got a new job, I think my first month in my position teaching there. And so they were just desperate to get somebody. And so I kind of just walked instantly in, worked out for me. But
Yeah.
I ended up then, seeing that application to become the college side of things, which
Yeah.
is kind of a dream come true. I love doing it for the high school kids, and I can only imagine what the college was like.
Yeah.
And the interview process was actually really cool. It included, at least for my specific experience, they have the entire athletic department invited to actually coach interviews. So
Wow.
I had multiple coaches as well as the athletic director interviewing me, which is a little overwhelming when you're going through an interview, but
Yeah.
it was definitely cool. A lot of people are really unfamiliar with the industry. And even though my athletic director had actually helped to start a program down in another school,
Okay.
he was very much knew the logistics, knew the business of it, but didn't know the actual sport of it. And so it was very clear they're trying to essentially ask these generic sports questions but they didn't have a grasp of what exactly they needed to ask about esports. They didn't know the specifics of it. And that's understandable. And I think that's probably really common across, all colleges in America, as it's really growing. And there's only about, a really small niche people that actually know about it, that are young enough, that are in those power positions currently within universities.
Yeah, man, that's fascinating to me. Yeah. So it is such a young person's sport, and you have to one want to step into a leadership management role, right? It's what it is. You're managing young adults, especially at the collegiate level. Have knowledge of video games and a love and a passion for it, because you also can't coach people things you don't know about, right? Like traditional sports is easy, we grow up with them, but there are thousands of video games to choose from, and it doesn't mean you're going to choose a competitive one to hone in on, because you could be a singles player story gamer where you don't ever get into competitive games. So it is a super niche market. And so I'm sure finding coaches has got to be I don't think I wrap my head around that either.
No, I'm on same agreement with you on that. Like, I kind of look at it as kind of a unicorn job.
Yeah.
Somebody put it really well. I can't remember who it was, but they said that generally a lot of universities, they get about three different kinds of coaches that apply for those positions. They get one who is the recruiter or the salesperson that can try to sell and get kids in, which obviously that's what these universities want.
Yeah,
But
sure.
then you want to see a successful program. It takes more than just being able to bring them in. And then you get the side where they're more of a video game focused person. They love video games, but they don't know how to manage a team. They don't know the business side of things. They're not really a recruiter. Maybe their social skills aren't there.
Yeah.
And then you end up with the last one who they've taught sports, they understand it, but they don't know video games. And so trying to find that collection of the three is really, really tough. And it's like we mentioned, it's so niche that a lot of times I'm sure a lot of these universities are struggling to even find a qualified applicant.
Dude, do you realize your upside on this?
Yeah, there's a lot, but at the same time too, there's still a big grind from it.
Sure.
It's a big thing that I always point to is think about how profitable esports is.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the large scale, if you look at the pro scene, there's obviously a ton of interest. We could see whether we're talking about Asia or we're talking about Europe, and watching how many people are viewing streams of these video
Right.
games.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we talk about colleges, there's only so many out there that are participating in it. It's growing, but at the same time too, the question is, how much demand is there? Is there enough to really make money from it? And what really separates this sport versus any other sport is, one, it's co-ed. You can have men and women both playing. And on top of that, there's very minimal travel. Everything's virtual. And so that is the biggest expense of any sports program out there. And so you're saving money on that. And honestly, for most athletic programs, it might be your only profitable program.
Yeah, when you started mentioning about men and women, and I didn't have it as my notes, but immediately went to, is this the only sport that has the ability to not be separated? Right.
Right.
So the inclusivity of this, the potential of this sport is absolutely massive.
Yeah, it
Also didn't
is.
think about that before. Here, like as we're talking, my brain's just going nuts. Yeah, that's crazy. And the
Yeah.
travel was one of my questions, because I figured you can do everything online. It's essentially what we all do at home, right? If you are a true gamer.
Mhm.
So do you feel that once either schools, high schools figure this, the money that can be made on this, because the expense side of it is so minimal, right? There's some startup costs. It's
Right.
really beefy computers, some of that equipment and stuff. Whether you buy kits or whatever, that doesn't even matter. That's just social stuff. Like if you're going to go to tournaments or something like that, but you don't even need that. It's pretty low startup costs, and really I don't know what recruiting looks like or if it's difficult or not, but I would imagine it's probably not that difficult.
Like we said, in their top division, they will have the championship usually hosted somewhere. I know NECC, 'cause that is the conference that we currently are competing in. We have the top division going down. I believe it's down in Texas. I want to say Houston, but I could be wrong on that one. But essentially, they are actually having a physical location for, which is really cool. But what makes it so attractive to all these schools is that they don't want that travel. They want to
Yeah.
see if, hey, can we save that money? We can bring in an extra 20, 30, 40 kids.
Yeah.
And essentially, this program's just going to be making money after money every single year.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. Oh man, that's awesome. So I'm assuming once you saw that first application in the high school arena, that's really when you realize, like, I might as well take a shot at this, and esports coaching could be a real thing. You already had some background, you love sports in general. So was that the point where you're like, well, I'm just going to take a swing at this and see what happens?
Yeah, honestly, exactly what you said. I saw the opportunity open up and I said, hey, why couldn't I do that? How many
Okay.
people around me are going to have those qualifications we talked about? And it's such a awesome opportunity, so much upside. What we're starting with today is going to be completely different than what we're going to be in 5 to 10 years. And
Hmm.
I'm absolutely in awe what that upside is going to be.
What did you play esports at all yourself?
I wish. I really do.
Same.
I unfortunately, at least in like the college scene, it was more so like a club level when
Okay.
I was in college. And so I never got the opportunity to. Now, I play very competitive games. I have my entire life as soon as, multiplayer online games became a thing.
Yeah.
And so like I've played with professionals in certain games and I've played the crap out of stuff, but I never was ever given that opportunity, and I never took the step to become a pro in a scene as well, which is something I did consider at one time, but
Sure.
never took that leap.
So for people who don't know this world, what is that? What do you think that pro step looks like? So
Yeah.
when do you go from I'm a very good player, but no one really knows and I play at home? What does that next step look like to you?
Yeah. So the being known is the big thing that you mentioned there. So as a player who's trying to, aspire to reach that level, you're going to have to one participate in a lot of different leagues, but you're also going to have to look for ways to kind of spread your awareness, let people know that you're actually really good at the game. And so some ways that people actually do this is they create content on like YouTube or Twitch, and then people see how good they are, and then that kind of sparks interest into them.
Hmm.
Or other opportunities too. I know I'm a big fan of NBA 2K. That's kind of where my bread and butter competitive game was. And so
Okay.
like they actually have a pro league in which they do a combine, kind of like a traditional sport.
Yeah.
And so players are actually able to compete during like a week. I forget what the actual timeline is, but like during a week where they can see who are the top players at this time, and they'll be eligible for the draft. And they'll actually get drafted based off of, how those teams felt they performed in that combine.
Yeah. So for parents potentially listening whose
Yeah.
kids are very into video games, they could be competing in pro level tournaments from their house and they
Yeah.
may never even know.
Yes. And as crazy as it sounds, some people are so good. They might be 17, 16, and they're playing at a pro level and they could actually participate on pro teams. It has happened.
Right. So there is certainly an age portion that goes into this, but it is not the what I want to say here. It's not the inhibitor that it is in other sports where
Right.
it's reactions, it's reaction speed, it's awareness, how to play the game, just how you move, whether it's, like first person shooters versus the sports games, knowing the sports games, knowing the players, how to pick that. Like you can be very good at a young age at all of that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know literally of an example of my best friend's nephew, as funny as that story might be, but he is just absolutely cracked at playing Brawlhalla. I've never played Brawlhalla, but he's like ranked in top 100 in the world. And I was like, this at the time he was 12. I was like, oh my God, he's now 16 and he still plays the game. So I imagine he's still very good.
Yeah.
But it's crazy. It's especially the younger generation coming up. They're growing now in this competitive scene, and they're growing now with all this technology, all these video games at their disposal, essentially. And
Mm,
we're seeing younger and younger people being able to compete with 20, 30-year-olds, which is just mind-boggling, which would never happen in any other sport. But it really kind of shows you where it's not necessarily
mm,
the physical aspect as much, but more
yeah.
so there's other things like the reaction time that go into it, or just kind of how things click in your brain.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so fascinating to me. So walk me through the first day that you met your team.
Yeah.
What did that look like?
Awkward as hell. Well, it was a bunch of dudes that were all kind of looking at me like, "Hey, is this a club or like what is this?" And it's kind of starting to try to change that perception that, hey,
Okay.
yeah, we're playing video games, but we are a competitive team. At our school, we're actually seen in athletics, which isn't true for every program out there.
Okay.
And so we have an actual dedicated budget. We have all that good stuff. We have that backing behind us to make sure that this is as successful as any other sports program here. And so to get these students to buy in, to understand, that's that hard part. And so
Mm.
like I know day one, like kind of talking to these guys, they listened to me, but they kind of had like, their eyebrow raised a little bit, like, all right, buddy, like I'm just here to play some games.
Thanks, Dad.
Right, right. And so that it was a little bit of a transition period, trying to get them to buy in, get them to see like we are a team and buy into this team culture that we have and really understand that we're working together to really compete. And it didn't feel like everybody came together until we finally were able to start getting into competition. And
Okay.
they really got to, get that drive that, hey, we want to win this trophy here. And so they ended up, bonding or buying in together, bonding with one another, and really trying to, build something really special that I'm super proud of being a part of.
So what were the, like you mentioned, like team culture, obviously collaboration, things like that. Like what was your main focus going to, like, obviously you're starting with people you've never met. It's a
Yeah.
brand new program. This is all very new for everyone. So it had to be totally nerve-wracking. Like what was your path? What was your couple of very high level things you wanted to focus on to get the maximum amount of the team collaboration?
Right. So to get the most out of it, what I ended up doing is day one, I actually just started evaluating. And
Ooh.
so I had everyone come in, they just played the games, and I said, hey, I'm just going to watch you play. And so I kind of kept tabs and I tried to learn both how good they were at the game, watch kind of their teamwork that they put out just consciously. And then beyond that, too, try to get a read on their personality. That was
Hmm.
probably my big three that I really tried to get an understanding with. And then from there, I could try to start putting the pieces together. And so I almost kind of saw it as like that puzzle where we kind of see, how can we make this team dynamic work? Who's going to really be the one that steps in charge? And I ended up naming, who's my team captain for this game? Who's my team
Yeah.
captain for that one? And that way we really have somebody, one, that we can rely on to be like, hey, they're our team leader. They're going to be the ones calling the shots, but also somebody else to kind of keep everybody at check and really kind of build that accountability that is really, really hard to find in esports right now.
So you were setting a baseline for your team to know who's where, to at least so you can either see improvement or you can see them falling away, maybe not being, but you were scanning everyone, getting performance metrics so you could mentally, and then I'm sure whether you have a spreadsheet, whatever that looks like, you're tracking their performance per game, per player, and what teams work well together. Okay, that's brilliant. What is, so you mentioned a couple of things in a couple of different games. What are the competitive games your team's competitively playing right now?
Yeah, so this current first year ever, we had Overwatch, we also
Okay.
had Rocket League and Smash Brothers.
Okay.
And so those were a big three to start with, and we're adding actually Valorant next year, and we're even talking about Fortnite because a lot of interest still there.
Okay. Yeah, so I played Overwatch I think for like 3 or 4 straight years. So I
Oh yeah.
love I know I played Rocket League, I'm not good at it at all, but I love soccer, which is funny. So pretty much it's just soccer with cars.
Yep.
So yeah, but some of the things that people do in that, and then you said Super Smash. Yeah, I've never really dabbled into that. Are you really good at any of those three?
Yeah, so Overwatch I am actually really good with, and
Okay.
first person shooters I have a ton of experience with, and
Okay.
so those are kind of my bread and butter. Now when it came to Smash Brothers, I played it as a party game,
Yeah,
and
sure.
so I'm coming in with not that expert knowledge at all. And
Okay.
so it's been a learning process for me with that game, absolutely. And I've had really good players, part of my team that have helped kind of walk me through it, teach me the lingo, teach me, what to look for. And I'm still growing as an individual in that area as well. And Rocket League, same as you, played it before a little bit, but casual, completely casual. And that is probably the biggest game where people will dump, I'm not joking, thousands of hours. And you can see the thousands of hours paying off. And it is
Yeah.
crazy
Yes.
To be at the level of just my current players who are freshmen, they're really young. They have put over 2,000 hours into that game, which is insane for perspective.
Yeah, they don't touch the ground.
Yes,
It
yes.
blows my mind. Like the whole game is played in the air. I can't. So I'm gonna nerd out here for a little bit. Who's your Overwatch main?
Uh, Probably Ana. I am a support main, and I
Oh,
go Ana.
let's go. Oh yeah, I'm a big Lucio Moira fan, and
Hey,
then
nice to.
Zarya with 2 tanks, no longer with the Overwatch
Yeah.
2, but
Yep.
oh, that's awesome. So, well, Super Smash Brothers, I feel would be very much like Overwatch, where there's so many character choices, there's so many powers, abilities that learning curve is very steep for you.
There is absolutely.
So do you leave practice and then go play Super Smash Brothers to really hone your skills, or are you using practice and your teammates to really increase your knowledge?
So a little bit of both, I'd say.
Okay.
So when it comes to like playing aspect, I actually just play a ton there. Like while they're
Okay.
playing, they're practicing, I will spend a lot of time playing with them, walking through with them, and they will actually almost in a way coach me, the game.
Yeah.
And now I start to notice, okay, I'm picking up on this. And then I can start identifying it with some of our more novice players and even some of our expert players. There's still like, little tendencies we can see. And just
Sure.
playing any video game, we know that those tendencies can be exploited. Just, a simple example, I have our best player. He really is good at engaging, but he's not good at zoning. And what zoning means is you're, keeping your opponent away. You're playing your space, your zone, and you're trying to use your projectile moves or, whatever you can send their way from space to essentially take advantage of what you have. It's definitely been a huge challenge, but it's definitely something that I really enjoy, and I use every ounce of it to really embrace and make myself better as just a gamer overall.
Yeah, and I just want the audience to wrap their heads around this again, and you said this at the beginning. You are being tasked with a brand new program, brand new students, and 3 games, 2 of which you have reasonable amount of knowledge, 1 which you're learning. All 3 of these games have very different rules, very different play styles, and very different, I would say, like just tactical approaches, right? Overwatch being extremely, extremely tactical in the way you play. And I understand what you're saying with the Super Smash Brothers. Even if you don't know, if you're one that records content or records your gameplay, if you go back and watch, you can see your mistakes, right? So essentially that's what you're doing for them. You're saying, hey, watch out for this, you did that, based on ticks or play styles or whatever. But now next year, you're adding, what'd you say, Valorant, Fortnite, and what was the other one?
Just Valorant Fortnite right now.
Okay.
That's the plan.
Fortnite FPS, it's like many other FPS. Is it build or no build?
It will be build.
Yeah, so okay, that's even an additional element that is really hard and really tactical as well. And then Valorant has so many choices, kind of like Overwatch, but with a mix of first person, that like you also have. Do you play a lot of both of those games?
Fortnite, I have actually a really good grasp on. I played a lot of
Okay.
Fortnite. So now it's been probably a hot minute since I did, but I know exactly everything in the game. I understand exactly how it works. I know the strategies involved. Now, when it
Right.
comes to Valorant, I know of it. I've played
Yeah.
maybe an hour of it. And so now I've already said, like this summer, it's Valorant training arc. So I'm getting ready. But I'm very much like a student of the game when it comes to all my
Yeah.
titles. I really stress just learning from YouTube. As simple as
Yes.
that is, I watch, I'm not joking, thousands of hours of YouTube just learning about games. Even games that I already know. A new video comes out, I'm watching it. I'm trying to see and get that competitive advantage over everyone I play, and I do the same thing for my players, trying to get that competitive advantage over other teams.
So I want to add another element to this just to give context to the audience. So this would be like playing football, right? But let's say, and this is the video game is football, but the other piece that's added to this is each of the football games are potentially going to change the rules, because if the game mode changes, that could change. And then let's say you're also going to change. It's not a typical football field. You're going to completely change the map. It's now going to look like you're going to be on an ice hockey rink playing football. Like you also have the map dynamic, which changes per game because they swap through them. I'm sure in tournaments and when you're playing against other teams, like you're having to wrap your head, and all of your players are wrapping their heads around all of these options that could be coming at them in the moment.
Absolutely. Perfect. I could have said it better myself.
So when you're going into a game or a competitive game against another college, do they tell you what maps you're going to be playing?
So the way that it typically works, and obviously every game's a little bit different, but we usually do something called map bans. And so if
Mm.
you're not familiar with video games, there's select maps or stages, or kind of like the example you said, like different fields, right? If we're talking about a football field or a soccer field, right? And so we have a select list that we're allowed to potentially play on. There's about like 15, 20, and then we go through bans. So we get a ban, the opposing team gets a ban, and then we end up whittling down this list until we end up on one specific map. And so in that case, game one, we might be playing on one map, while game two, it could be on a different map. And in the case of Overwatch, the game we discussed a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
that has different game modes. And so every single game is actually a different game mode. So imagine where the rules change, and now there's a new objective. Instead of scoring touchdowns, we now have to shoot baskets for basketball. It completely changes. It's absolutely fascinating, and at the same time really intense and really hard to
Yeah.
be a master of, but it's really fun. And the constant evolving, the constant thinking that's really involved with gaming is why I absolutely love it.
Yeah, but and I want to go back to your unicorn comment because I want, like, I think once again, you need to realize what you're doing because we're talking like if you take your traditional coach, the rules will never change for them. They've lived them, they breathe them probably for their entire career.
Right.
So they have to focus on collaboration, teamwork, leadership, and whatever style that looks like to be successful. So you have to have an intense love for video games because you're about to spend your summer learning a new game that you've spent 1 hour playing because your team is going to rely on you to know it. Right. So, but because you love video games, you're going to spend that time, you're going to dig in. And on top of that, you have to be, unlike many gamers, very good with people, very social, very open, know leadership skills, know all of those things that I would say are not typical to the gaming world, non-toxicity, all of the things that go with that, and smash that into one person, which is why you're a unicorn. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's intense. And am I perfect at it? No, but I don't think there probably is a coach out there that is. And maybe we'll reach that stage. We'll see if you're familiar with football, college football, Nick Saban, the Nick Saban of esports, whoever that might become. Or
you already got the first name, dude. You're already there.
as a joke, my brother actually calls me that, but
that's awesome.
But it's something that it's so new, especially in America, that we don't know what it's going to look like, what that framework is going to be. And I know personally for me, I'm trying to lay out the best, path that I can take that's going to make me the most well-rounded in this specific field. But I do know to kind of, combat some of what I'm doing, trying to learn all these games. Some of the bigger programs, they actually have a coach dedicated for every single title.
Gotcha.
And so, I see that strategy. It makes sense. Instead of changing those rules, changing complete different, mindsets, you have somebody who's dedicated to it, which is awesome. But at the same time, too, think from the university standpoint. Well, now we have to pay, 4 or 5 people. And so that becomes a question as well. What is going to be the better way or better track to take?
Well, and it's almost like a special teams coach, offensive, defensive, right? That's essentially what you're asking for, is a very specialized, specific person, and then it would be a separation by game. And if it gets big enough, you could have an offensive Overwatch coach and a defensive Overwatch coach, right? If you really get super specific, and if it makes enough money. So can you walk me through what a practice day looks like for you and your team?
Yeah, so it's going to be a little bit different depending on the title, but generally we right now practice for 2 hours a day.
Okay.
When we do practice. And so the way that looks is we would generally come in, we'd warm up. And for Overwatch, for example, we then would either have a scrimmage, so we're actually facing other schools, or we could even be facing other semi-pros or just other people that are around our general rank or skill level.
And is that straight online, rated into competitive, or you actually have closed matches, private matches?
We do both. So sometimes in competitive, or sometimes we have a little servers, communication servers that we use, and that we will actually reach out and say like, hey, is anybody around this rank that wants to have a match with us? And
Sure.
so we'll do kind of like it's an online, but not like recorded for actual rank, if you're familiar with
Yeah.
gaming. And so in that case, it's really beneficial for us. We get to, try new strategies, see what works, what doesn't. And then once it's game time, we get to actually pull out whatever we think is best.
Okay. Walk me through a game day.
Yeah. Game day, we come in about 2 hours before actual start time, and that 2 hours is all warm up. And
Okay.
so we want to make sure that we're sharp and ready to absolutely blow the doors of whoever we're facing.
Okay.
And so my idea, I know at least for me, I always have rust every single day I first start playing. And so that has really been something I built into my team is, hey, we need to get that rust off. We need to be sharp. As soon as it's game time, we're ready.
Okay.
And once it hits that game day, or excuse me, that game time, we then will hop in. We'll be talking actually online. If you're familiar with Discord, it's
Yep.
a game very big for gaming communication. And so we'll
Sure.
use Discord. We'll talk with the other team, and we're like, hey, who's hosting? And then we'll figure out essentially the map bans, and then it's game time. And in the middle of the match, it's actually really unique for our sport. We're not allowed to talk as a coach. So during match,
Wow.
I cannot have any communication with my team. That is actually in the rule book. And
That's
so,
fascinating. I wonder why.
yeah, well, it's interesting because you think of maybe like basketball, you have like that coach who's screaming the entire game, complaining to the refs why they didn't get a foul or whatever it might be. Well, with gaming, it could be seen as a competitive advantage if you have somebody else telling somebody how to play or where somebody is or making call outs for them.
Okay.
And so you really have to, indulge your team in the idea that, hey, during the actual game, you are now the coach. You're the one
Mhm.
calling the shots. And so you have to really groom them for that idea. And so we actually have an in-game lead for Overwatch who's in
Yes.
charge of actually calling shots, when the team should engage or fall back or take certain objectives or attack a certain opponent. And so they kind of are like the mini coach of that current time. But we've also built a really good culture where everyone's communicating. And hey, see something, say something, I always say.
Hey. So in between each round, like as soon as the round's over, I'm assuming you can jump in and say, hey, this is what I saw. But then as soon as the round,
Right.
or is it during the entire game?
Yeah. So in between rounds, we can.
Okay.
So in the actual match, once it's live, no communication at all. So my job, I'm just watching. I'm trying to pick up on those tendencies, see why we're really struggling or what's really working that we really need to take advantage of, and I can let them know in between those games, hey, these are the adjustments that we need to make, and then it's up to my players to make those adjustments, or even on the fly, they'll have to make those adjustments and make those calls themselves.
How does the league monitor that?
Yeah, good question. Unfortunately, I think it needs to be a lot better of
Mm,
a system. Our current league has us actually in their own Discord server, and we
okay.
have to be in a voice channel so they can see who's in essentially the channels. And during actual match time, I just have to be muted in there.
Okay.
What's to say that I didn't just walk away and then I'm talking to a player? There's really no way to actually prove that. It's almost
Okay.
kind of like honor code at that way
Yeah,
or that
sure.
point. But that's kind of the best system that they've come up with. I wish there was a better way. And especially considering how many people that they can employ, how much money that they make, it then becomes question, is it even feasible unless they hire more people?
Sure. Okay. Is there a home and away, or how does that work?
Yes, technically, yeah. Though it doesn't really feel that way. There's not really much of an advantage being home
Yeah,
or
sure.
away. Generally, what we'll say is home team hosts. And so that's
Okay.
generally what we'll follow. But sometimes, maybe we have a better connection and we'll flip it or something of that nature.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the other thing I think people need to realize is internet connection's probably the most important thing to this league.
Right.
Is lag will kill
Yeah.
this type of thing, period. So
Imagine throwing a football and you have to, you cock back your arm and you can't throw for 3 seconds.
yeah, that's a very good point. So have you ever run into those situations where that's a huge problem?
Yes. Unfortunately, the biggest one where it comes up all the time is Super Smash Brothers. They are owned by Nintendo, and Nintendo is very poor when it comes to multiplayer gaming. They
Yeah.
haven't invested a lot of money into it. And so there's a lot of times where there will be lag or there will be delay. And I know constantly players will be complaining, oh, if only this was like in person, not online. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's kind of the cards we're dealt at the moment.
Yeah. I'm wondering if they would cycle the game out because of that. Because if Nintendo doesn't keep up with that, like the more money that gets into this, people are not going to accept losing because of lag.
You would think. Now, there is actually a really big pro scene and so much following that you would think they would want to encourage it. But for some strange reason, I don't know the answers, but they have not ever seen their games as being an esport title or wanting to hop into that competitive industry. They've always wanted to be casual and fun.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So we talked about travel. So you mentioned about plays and calls. So
Sure.
when the game's going on, you're leaving that up to your captain. You said you also leave it up to the team, but you do have plays per game.
Yes. Like you're saying, like design plays that we run.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll actually, especially like Overwatch, we'll actually not maybe necessarily plays, but we have game plans and we have combinations of moves that we use together.
Yep.
And so we have, without going to too detailed specifics, but we have player A does really good synergy with players B's character. And so in certain opportunities where it's going to be awesome, they're going to be like, hey, player B, why don't you come over here? We're going to take this person on. We're going to, do X, Y, and Z. And generally, it should work if they do it
combos,
correctly.
Right?
Yes.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I would say, I guess Valorant would be kind of similar because there's powers in that.
Right.
Super Smash is huge, I'm sure, with plays. I guess it's a lot of territory on that. I don't know Super Smash Brothers as much, and then I don't know about Rocket League and what the plays look like there. If you have any insight on that.
Yeah. So it's not as traditional plays. It's more so, I'd say, scenario based. What is the optimal way to play?
Sure.
And so just for example, something that's really big in that game is just rotations. And so where should my character be rotating based off where the ball is, where the enemy team is, where my teammates are, and being able to then communicate to your team that you're rotating that way. Because, hey, if you're not communicating, next thing you know, your two cars, you're going to bump.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, so you mentioned communication. I mean, I would say on all of those games you played, well, anything team-based, which is so funny because when you play online and competitive, the main complaint is nobody uses their mic, which is absolutely infuriating because especially with a game like Overwatch, you have to communicate. So I'm assuming they come in with that mindset of like, hey, we're all in the same room or we're in the same Discord call. Like we already know this sport's just like every other sport. We need to communicate.
Yep. And that day one, that is absolutely what I preach. It's just communication. That's what I did with high school. I saw it work absolutely tremendous for us. And then I did it for college, and it's, allowing us to blossom as people, and we're getting better at it. And what you really notice is the teams that communicate better, they're on the same page. They're going to be playing at a completely different speed than the team that's not.
What was the main difference you saw between coaching high school versus coaching college? Maturity?
Yeah, I'd say maturity and commitment were probably the biggest things. And so I know, especially we talked about that club mindset versus being a varsity sport. And in high school, I mean, most people view it as that club. Well, yeah, you had some people that were committed to it. There were a lot of flaky people who weren't showing for practices or weren't doing X, Y, and Z.
How does team rotation work? Like, how do you cycle through players, or is there a JV varsity? What does that look like?
Yeah. So as a very new program, that's still kind of in its infancy for us, but I exactly have the framework already out in play. I know how that will be. So there is a varsity team and there's technically a JV team, though we just haven't had enough people to actually compete as a JV team.
Okay.
Which, by the way, you can compete. Sorry if phone's ringing.
No, you're good.
Okay. But yeah, so technically you can compete with how many teams you'd like. And so you could have 10 teams, you could have 5 teams. Depends on however many teams you can essentially fill. And so for us right now, we only have enough to compete with just one, but we already have a game plan where next year we're going to have enough students where we're going to have 2 teams for each title.
Okay.
And in that regard, how we rotate them is we essentially just try to give them each enough playing time. The varsity team generally will play most of the time together. And then the JV team or the backups will be playing with themselves, as it's really important to build that chemistry together. And a lot of times too, we're really focusing on the upcoming game. So it's almost a little bit more emphasis on the varsity team, which kind of sucks. I wish it was different. I wish I could split myself into 3 people, but that's just kind of the state of where we're at.
Gaming's known for its toxicity. How does the league or yourself handle that?
So there are rules behind it. You can, report people, open up tickets, support tickets, and then a game
Okay.
manager would reach out and they would, handle it, look into what happened, if there should be a punishment for it. And there have been times where players have been removed. I
Okay.
know, especially even the college level, fortunately, it wasn't my school, but there was a school that had an issue with a COD championship where
Wow.
COD being Call of Duty, sorry for those that don't know.
No.
And so that championship, there was a player that was talking crap, literally got up screaming profanity at another player. And that kid actually got kicked out of school for that specific moment.
Wow.
And it's
Good for them.
The school took it really seriously. I know our school would take it very seriously. And you can definitely see even our league will take it seriously too, and even suspend players or even actually ban a team from competing.
That's good. That's good to hear because it's, not good. How do you recruit?
I've found it's really interesting to recruit. So
lots of YouTube.
Right. No, but the way that it works, so you think of traditional sports, you go out, you visit these schools and watch, actual games. It's a little bit different. So the way that it works in esports is it's not as built as in person as, we discussed. It's really remote. And so the best way to see them would be via Twitch, which is a streaming platform for video games. And so you can actually watch teams there. There's actually websites that are dedicated for recruitment for esports as well. As NCSA, I think it's called, is actually used for all of athletics. And now esports is a title on there. So you can actually, sign up if you have a son or daughter who's interested in playing, or currently if you are interested in playing, you can make an account on there and hopefully get recruited through that.
What do you look for in a recruit besides gameplay?
Yeah, gameplay's huge, but besides that, we're looking for personality. We want to see, are they going to be a fit for our team? We talked a little bit about toxicity, right? And that's something that I just don't put up with at all, and something that I am very conscious of because that's going to impact our team culture. And so I really try to gauge, the actual student themselves and seeing, are they going to be a good fit for us? As well as, are we going to be a good fit for them? I don't want to put anyone in the situation where they came here to play video games and they didn't make the best choice for them. I am very much somebody who wants everybody to, find their own path and find out why you should be here. And if you should be here, I want you here.
Do you guys have sponsors? What does your gear look like for your team?
Yeah. So right now we're in the process of working with sponsors.
Okay.
We have really weird regulations being part of IU. But for us, that's definitely going to be our very near future. We actually are in contact with a couple local businesses and hopefully going to use our arena to sponsor,
Nice.
putting like their title, their name on there. We can actually even talk about getting patches on our jerseys or anything of that nature. Even just hosting events for them as well is something that we're really big into trying to get involved with. And the actual jerseys themselves, we have a vendor through BSN, they're called BSN Sports, and they handle all of our athletics. And so we actually get our equipment through them. But I do know there's actually dedicated esports gear websites, which are pretty cool that, hey, maybe in the near future, we'll end up switching over to them. Who knows?
And I'm assuming all your hardware is computer-based, so you're looking at high-end mice, keyboards, whatever that looks like for gear, and then a high-end computer.
Right. To just ballpark the numbers, we're talking about $3,000 to $4,000 equipment, like just for the PC itself. It's intense.
4090s all around.
Yes.
Very cool. Yeah, and that's the one thing I obviously it's expensive. It seems expensive, but it's cheaper than pads and some of the other stuff, I'm sure.
Right.
Other pro scouts.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Like if you make it to a national championship or a national championship tournament, or the biggest piece of your league, is there pro scouts there looking to recruit?
Yeah, the pros are definitely there. It would be more so the pro coaches and team managers for those pro teams. It's a little bit weird. I'd say they would definitely be at big championships. They'd be watching big streams. But when it comes to actually, looking for that talent and finding that next talent, a lot of times they get people to kind of come to them. They get a lot of, certain tournaments that they're watching, and they already know, that club. So kind of think of like your traditional professional sport where you have maybe 30 teams in the league. And there are specific clubs that will compete in each of these different video games. And everybody who's within that industry already knows these clubs. And so they're constantly, networking, talking with people, whether they're on the team already or they're trying to talk with, the team managers and trying to, negotiate like, hey, give me a shot, or like, check out my footage, check out my, last tournament, and get their perspective on that. It's not at the level as, other sports are, but it's certainly working its way to that.
Do the other coaches at IU treat you like a coach?
Interesting question. Sorry, my camera's freaking out.
No, you're good.
But yes, they generally, I've had no major issues.
Okay.
There are certainly some coaches that are a little bit more hesitant than others. They definitely question, and you could see them kind of tiptoe around the idea of it being a sport. But I think within time, that stigma will go away at some point.
All right, that's cool. Where do you see esports going in the future?
Sorry, I'm trying to still get this camera figured. All right, I'm good. All right. So esports of the future, that is the big question. I have high aspirations. I'm a very positive person when it comes to it. I see it being something that's going to really grow. Now, the big question is the college scene versus the pro scene is how I look at it. And so the college scene, I think, has a ton of growth. And like I mentioned earlier, I think it's a really big moneymaker for a lot of these universities. And it's a really cool opportunity for a lot of these students.
Yeah.
And I see that being kind of where a lot of the money is going to be placed at. Now, we've seen in pro leagues, especially in North America, a lot of the pro leagues are really struggling. Overwatch recently canceled their pro league. Now they've brought it back with some twists to it, but they were having a lot of problems almost overpromising what esports was at the time. They were buying really big arenas, spending millions of dollars for something that didn't have the capacity to bring enough revenue to actually support that. And I think we'll probably get to a state where that pro scene will be a lot more, watched, maybe not on the level of, soccer is in the world or what NFL is in America. But I do think that it's going to grow, and I do think it will be at some point a lot more sustainable than what it currently is at.
What is the best part of your job?
I play video games all the time.
Yes, great answer.
You can't beat that. Like it's really great. But in all honesty, if I'm comparing it to other jobs, it's really the flexibility that it comes with.
Okay.
Being able to remotely do my job sometimes, being able to, communicate and set some of my hours, what works for me and my players. And essentially I could sleep in if I really wanted, because all our matches are at night. That is awesome.
Yeah, so your business or your management style has no issue with remote working, because that's all it is.
Yeah. Like we have an in-person facility, but there's definitely days like the weather's bad, it's snowing out. It's a snow day. We're playing from home.
That's amazing. What's the worst part?
Well, good question. I don't know if I've ever thought about that.
Because you're positive.
Yeah. Worst part probably has to be where I see the potential of the program going, and where sometimes administration doesn't see that same potential or doesn't see it at that level yet.
Sure.
And I can see what 10 years looks like for this program. I know where we're going to be, but getting them on the same page as that is more of the challenge, and getting them to see where can this lead is really hard. And as I mentioned, it's an older generation that are in these administration parts, and they don't play video games.
Sure.
They don't know what that industry looks like. And even people that play video games don't know what that industry looks like. It's such a question mark right now. And
yes.
Yeah, I was saying there's the only word I can describe esports right now is potential, because that's what it is.
Yeah, it's almost, there's a gap of business-minded gamers, right? And I would put myself in this sphere of business because I love gaming. I love it so much. It's my off switch from the day job. But from a business side of things, it's the potential of what it could be, while also talking about leadership and teamwork and all the things the schools want to hear. But then also the upside of revenue to the school is the piece you also have to be conscious of. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Gotcha. for someone who wants to take this career path, give me 3 key insights that you would tell you someone at a younger age that's looking to get into it.
Yeah. Well, for starters, I'd say master a game. Understand
Okay.
the ins and outs of what it's like to be really, really good. And I'm not just saying like, hey, I'm better than my friends. I'm saying you're borderline going to be becoming pro. Like you're dedicating a lot of time into it. I think that's important because you understand how to get to the level that you need to be great at this game. And that's what you need to share with your players. I think the other big portion I would put to that is get involved early. Look for opportunities to be an assistant coach, to get involved with a high school. There's a lot of high schools out there that are looking for people in the esports. They see the potential in it, but they have nobody to fill that position. So why couldn't you do it? And so get involved, get your foot in the door, start learning from the ground up, network, get to know the industry. And I think the last one is really understanding how to manage people. I think just the whole social skill aspect, the emotional intelligence is so big when it comes to esports. And really being able to focus on that is going to be crucial, whether your team is able to work together or if you have a bunch of lone wolves essentially doing their own thing that will never be able to reach the potential that they could.
So I'm going to ask you this next question, even though I think I already know the answer because I did meet your dad and he's a wonderful person. Did your parents ever go, 1, you play video games too much, or 2, you're becoming an esports coach? What is that and why would you do that?
Well, I would say I have really, really supportive parents. That is one thing I can absolutely get behind and say very proudly. They have never questioned the obsessive amount of hours I've put into gaming. Now, my siblings have definitely some other opinions, but they have never, ever told me that, hey, you can't play anymore or you need to stop this. They've encouraged me, if anything. They realized I loved it. And they pushed me into it. They said, hey, do what you love. And that is something that I will always be thankful for. And then the second portion of that, what was the other portion? I'm sorry.
Did they ever question you taking this career path?
Oh, they laughed when I first told them. They said, no, is that real? But they were super supportive, especially my dad. He said, hey, I know this is your life. You grew up doing this. There's nobody who would be better at doing this. And he,
that's awesome.
He encouraged me to take that leap and to do it. And so I did it. I can say that I'm happily doing it and part of my journey of working within the esports industry. And I could not be happier to say that it has never been a doubt in my mind. This is where I want to be.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you found your passion. Amazing. What's your favorite competitive video game?
Oh, well, it used to be 2K, NBA 2K. And they, unfortunately, I am very anti the company that owns them. And they've taken a route that I'm not very happy with for the past few years. And so right now, I'm probably shifting over to Overwatch or even in a new game, the finals right now, I'm really big into. And I'm really excited to see where that will end up.
Cool. Yeah, that's way too chaotic for me. The FPSs for me include like Battlefield. That's like kind of where I stop, but I'm a huge vehicle monster, so I wouldn't call that first. I wouldn't call that first person shooters then.
Right.
What's your favorite single player game you've ever played?
Well, I've played a lot of really good ones. I love God of War. Love the Uncharted series.
Yes.
My go-to, I think my favorite all time is Ghost of Tsushima, if you've ever played it.
Okay. I have not, but I know about it.
So worth it. Please do. Do yourself a favor.
Okay. I'm terrible at those types of games, which is like the counter combat,
Yeah.
Like I just don't hit the right buttons ever. Like I struggled with Batman Arkham. So like that tells you everything you need to know.
It's worth it. Like learn the combat, play it for the story. Like,
yeah, the game's beautiful. It's unbelievably beautiful.
The detail put in there, it's a movie. It feels like I'm playing a movie.
Yeah,
I cannot express how impressed I am with their development team.
Yeah, I mean, all 3 of the ones you named there, God of War is a movie, Uncharted is actually a movie, and I heard God of War is becoming a show or a movie.
Yes, yeah, God of War is becoming a movie, I believe. So I just know these because I'm super excited for him. Ghost of Tsushima is actually getting its own movie.
Okay.
And as well as, I believe, what was the other one?
Fallout comes out next week.
Fallout's getting one. That's a really good one. There's one other, but I can't think of it right now. But
Well, even Last of Us, I mean, was brilliant.
Yep, that's what I was gonna say. Yep, Last of Us. I love the TV show. Season 2 is coming
Yes.
out soon. I'm not
Yes.
sponsored by them, but please do yourself a favor.
Give it a go.
Right.
Well, this was amazing. Thank you, one, so much for your time. Is there anything you want to promote? Once again, I haven't, my first 2 episodes drop on Tuesday, so whether anybody actually listens to any of these, I'm not totally sure. So thank you for coming on here and doing this before you even know. Is there anything you'd like to promote or tell anybody about?
Yeah, I was gonna say thank you for having me. Like, this has really been a lot of fun. I am really big about just spreading awareness. I don't really have
Yeah.
anything to promote other than, hey, if you have somebody you know that loves video games, embrace them. Push them into that passion, and hopefully it can be esports for them, or if not, it's, a great outlet for them to, put some of that extra energy and emotion into.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nick, for coming along and teaching us all about this crazy world you're living right now.
Thank you.